Howdy folks, welcome back to Faded Paint Garage. In this episode we're going to work on replacing the intake manifold on the 56. So the 56 is a bone stock 1990 5.0 out of a foxbody Mustang. So what I'm about to do here should be the same thing if you had a foxbody, because everything underneath this hood Mustang wise is bone stock, and the fitment and all that stuff should be all the same. I mean, throttle linkage, all that stuff is off the Mustang, so should be pretty straightforward. So this particular intake that I'm putting in is off a Ford Explorer, and this is a real cheap upgrade for an intake manifold on these. So the V8 5.0 Explorers and Mercury Mountaineers from 93 to I think 2001. I can't remember when they stopped running them, but the best ones to get if you want the most things to be able to swap over, like the EGR and the ACT, is I believe 95 to early 97. This one is a February 1997, which I just lucked out. I wasn't looking for that. I was just trying to find a Ford Explorer intake when I picked this one up at the wrecking yard, or swap meet. So that'll allow the EGR to work, even though I don't have EGR hooked up, so it doesn't really matter. But it has the embossment for the ACT. It's not drilled and tapped, so we'll have to drill and tap it to put the ACT on it. Alternatively, you can put the ACT like on where the air filter box is. You can extend the wiring, I guess. A lot of guys do that. So my plan is to put it in the manifold because I can drill and tap it. I don't think that's a big deal. There's some other little differences. This has a 90-degree elbow, which we'll remove. But what I did find, so for some reason, when I bought this, it was in two pieces, and the bolts weren't included. The bolts that hook the upper intake to the lower intake, and the Explorer has two of them are long. There's two spots on here that on the Mustang they're short bolts, and on this one they're long bolts. So if you use the Mustang bolts for this, you'd be short two long bolts. But it turns out it looks like there's two long bolts attached to this elbow piece. So if you get that piece with it, these bolts should replace that, and then we won't use this elbow. The throttle body will go straight into the upper intake, just like the Mustangs does. The Ford Explorer has a 65 millimeter throttle body versus the Mustang 60. I plan to use the Explorer if I can. The throttle piece on the throttle adapter on the Explorer is a little bit different, so we'll have to I think we can remove the little plate and put the Mustang one on there. And then the throttle position sensor has a different plug. I might be able to just put the other sensor on here. If not, we can cut the plug off and just put the Mustang's plug on there and go with that. I think there was something different about how the heater hose pieces connect. So we can probably just use the Explorers if need be, but we'll look at that. Or I can drill and tap this one. I think it's got everything that we need if we needed to drill and tap. The Explorer has 19-pound injectors, I believe, but from what I'm reading, there is probably no performance gain in using the Explorer injectors, but maybe there is. I'm planning on using the Mustang injectors because I know they all work and they're fine. So that'll be my plan once we get this all cleaned up. So just an intake swap like this should net us between about 5 and 1,000 horsepower. No, so 15 horsepower, I think, is about what you get from this swap. A lot of guys also take the Explorer heads. They're better heads, GT40 heads, I believe, or GT40P heads. We're not going to be doing that, but that would be an upgrade as well if I had those. Not going to do that right now at this point anyway. So first thing to do is we're going to get it all cleaned up. The intake we're replacing, the factory Mustang one, I polished it. It looks really nice, but it was polishing a turd. So I don't think I'm going to bother doing that with this one, at least at this juncture. We'll just go with it, clean it up for now. And then so there's other things I think as we go through this, but I'll point them out as we go. But it should be pretty straightforward for the most part. Again, this is a real common swap. Guys have been doing this forever. Gives you a little bit of horsepower for these average 150 to 250 bucks. I think I paid 50 or something at the swap meet. So I was real tickled to find that because I'd been looking for one for a while rather than the aftermarket ones. They're nice, but they're quite a bit more money than that. So we'll get started. So something I just learned that is different between these intakes and the Mustang is there's an embossment behind the frost plug on these. The Mustang doesn't have that. So on the Mustang, I just heated this up and kind of punched it to loosen it, and then I was able to spin it and get it out. Well, I was beating on this one and not getting anywhere. So I started taking a punch and punching through there, and then finally the punch went through and I just pulled it up, and the whole thing just came out because it can't go through like the other one. So FYI, I didn't hurt anything, but yeah, so a little different. Get this out. I wanted to at least take one of these out so that I could get in there and clean better. I might go ahead and pop the other one out. I could probably just run a piece of something all the way through this and knock the other one out real easy. It doesn't hurt. I've heard of these things popping out once in a blue moon. So since I'm this far, I might as well. And I've bought new ones. I think they were 1.5 inch and a half plugs. So yeah, that's funny. Okay, we got the intake all stripped down, ready for the next step. I did use my die grinder with little Scotch-Brite pads to clean up all the gasket surfaces. It works really well. I would probably recommend against doing that on the engine side, like if you have an assembled engine, just because all the dust and stuff that this thing spits around, it's super fine. It's hard to get that, keep that from getting into your orifices and things, so your passageways. So be careful if you do that. We still have lots of cleaning to do on these, so no issues there. So the next step is the ACT port right here. So it has the embossment for it, and that's where it is on the foxbody intake. So this 97 version, and like if you're junkyard shopping or swap meet shopping, I believe there's some years of these Explorer intakes that don't have that. You can relocate this, I've read, just fine to the air box. You don't have to have it here. You just have to extend the wires, but we'll put it here since we've got that, and I'm not too worried about tapping it. So this takes a 3/8 national pipe thread, so NPT. Ideally, I believe it's a 37 by 64 drill bit, but a 9/16 will work. The biggest thing is to not run your tap when you're tapping it all the way in. You want this to be tapered so that when the fitting goes in, it gets tighter as it goes before it bottoms out. So we'll make sure, I'll probably tap it, test fit it, and tap it. You know, it's easier to do more if I need to, but you can't back out once you, if you go too far, you're SOL. So not a big deal though, since we know that. So I'll go see what kind of drill bits I got, see if I can get this drilled and tapped, and then we'll, once that's done, I think we're ready for the pressure washer and the degreasing phase. So I've got it drilled out to just 1/2 inch for right now. I'm surprised how much meat is in that intake right there. That thing, that goes a long way. So that's awesome. My hole's not perfectly center, but plenty big enough for what we're about to do. Honestly, I wanted it a little bit that way. The way it felt in here, it's closer against the shoulder on this end than it is on this end. So I'm not going to say that was on purpose, but I'm not sad about it. So now I'm going to go 9/16. I don't have a 37/64. It's kind of an oddball. 9/16 is a hair smaller and should work just fine. We've got the fitting, so as we're tapping it, we can test it as we go. So I think we'll be okay. So I'm going to go sharpen up my 9/16 bit before we start that, and then get to tapping. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. It's a little tricky because normally when I'm tapping something, what I'm tapping is perfectly level with like a bench or something. You know, it's a piece of flat metal. This is a little tricky. I got a little nervous starting to tap in because you can't really tell where level is. I mean, it's going to hopefully follow your drill bit hole, but I'm just going to be careful. Anyway, so here's what we've ended up with. Plenty of threads, so there's lots of meat in this guy. And then it runs in a good 3/4 of the way before it gets tight, which I think is just right. So goes in nice, starts nice and easy. So, what I read too is the 9/16 drill bit's a hair undersized, so it's a little bit harder to tap because of that. So this thing works pretty good. I think it was a cheap set I got off of Amazon, but whatever you got, but you might have to have some decent amount of leverage to get that done. So anyway, I'm happy with that. So now we will go to cleaning. There's something else I want to point out that we're going to change, or that's different on this Explorer intake. So on the factory Mustang intake, there's also 2 ports at the back. So here's the front here. This is the back. So on the Mustang, there's 2 ports right here that are tap for 3/8 NPT as well. Explorer has the emboss that you can see, but they're not thread and tapped. So on the Mustang, the driver's side is just got a plug in it. On the passenger side, there's a fitting and this runs coolant. So there's a fitting here with a nipple on it that ties up into the EGR spacer on the intake manifold. So if you want to keep that the same as it was on the Mustang, you'll want to drill and tap this as well. What I'm going to do, and you can as well, is this is the heater hose fitting or tubes for the Explorer. The Mustang is very similar, except it only has 1 port on the, I don't know if this is in or out, which circuit does what, but it has one of these nipples, but not the other one. And then the other difference, so on the Mustang, it would like come in here, go up to the EGR, and then it comes out of the EGR and goes into the intake up here, not into this. It doesn't have a nipple on the other tube. I don't know which is which on the Mustang, but basically there's one here, one here. So going with the Ford Explorer heater hose system, you've got 2, so I can run the EGR in and out of these 2. But what I've noticed is that one of the tubes on the Mustang is larger. So like one of these is a 1/2 inch and the other one's 5/8 or something like that, which is kind of weird. And I've got mine looped back into each other right now, but I had to make a crappy hardware store fitting because these aren't the same size hoses on the Mustang. So my thought would be is if you're doing this on the Mustang, it'd probably be better to tap this and reuse your factory heater hoses. Otherwise, you're going to have a hose size problem, or you're going to have to do something here so you can fit the factory size hoses on it. For me, it's better to have these both the same size because I'm just looping them back in. And when I do get a heater system, chances are the hoses are going to be the same size on this end. So my plan right now is I'm going to use the factory Explorer heater hose system. I might go ahead and order a new part. On the Mustang, there's an O-ring inside of here that's not serviceable. It'd probably be a good idea to replace this whole thing with a new one so that piece is new. So if it's not too expensive, I'll order one of these to put on this truck. Thus, not needing to do this, I will loop my EGR in and out of the Explorer tube. So otherwise, I guess depends what's going to suit you the best. If it's going to be easier to drill and tap that and keep the Mustang stuff, I would just go ahead and do that. It was no big deal. I mean, it's the exact same process we just did over here. So no worries in doing that. I think I'd rather have the Explorer heater tube system over the Mustang because of these being the same size. So there's no point in messing with this. I'll use these ports here instead. Got the intake soaking overnight. I ended up just putting it in here, not pressure washing it yet. So I'm just using some degreaser. I just put it in full strength and then whatever it took to fill that up. So it looks like it's doing good so far. Grabbed a toilet brush thing and kind of scrubbed a little bit, put it back in there. So now I'm going to take it out, pressure wash it, and see how it looks. All right, going to get the plugs put in on the sides of the intake here. Normally I'd use my press because it makes it a little easier, but I've got so much crap piled around it right now, I'm not going to bother. So I just got a socket that fits the cup. Throw the extension on there just so I don't smash my hand as easy. And I'm going to use some Permatex. It's Forma Gasket Aviation. Super 300 is what I used last time, so I think they're both pretty similar. Some guys say install them dry, but I think it's good to have a little bit of something on there. So We'll get that coated. They should go in pretty easy. Let me double check it to make sure everything's as clean as I want it to be. Yep, that looks good. Make sure the surface is clean, and it is. Make sure my plug is clean. I'll just take this and give it a nice coating. I think I heard that you're supposed to wait until it's tacky before you install it, but this isn't a normal, like for a gasket. We're just going to slip it in, so I'm not too worried about it being tacky for this scenario. Rub off the excess, but this is fuel safe, so don't have to worry about it being an intake. It'll be rated just fine for that. So as I saw or mentioned earlier, this has an embossment, or whatever you want to call it. It's got a lip on the inside, so that you can't overdrive these like you can on the Mustang's factory one. Which is nice because you can just drive it in there till it hits bottom, and then you're good to go. The part number on this is a Dorman 555077. If you need that, 1.5 inches, I believe. So, or just look it up. They're not too hard to find. So one down. I'm going to clean that. Oh, I actually dripped it all the way through to the other end. I was like, what is that? Okay, yeah. Don't worry about that. But let me clean it just in case it's some foreign substance that I'm not aware of, which I don't think it is, but better safe than sorry. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Alright. Carb cleaner. Take a peek down this end, make sure we're looking good. Oh, it looks spiffy. Alright. Rinse and repeat over here. Let me get my plug ready. Again, this is Permatex Aviation, so Super 300 works good too. I think Super 300 is a little thicker. This stuff seems runny, which is perfect for this. That's good for most stuff. Unless you're forming an entire gasket, this stuff works pretty good in conjunction with a gasket. So set that on there. All right. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. All right. So that's it for that part. So I'm going to move to cleaning out the injector ports with a little Dremel wire brush thing. So I don't know if this is a cardinal sin to do this, but I've got a little nylon, real soft brush on my Dremel. And I'm going to run it into each of the injector ports just to clean out the carbon or whatever gunk's left in those. So I did it on the Mustang one, and it didn't seem to have any problems. So we'll do it on this one too. Okay, I think that did a good job. So at least I don't think it could hurt anything. So I think that's all I need to do on these. I think now it's moving on to getting the old one off the truck. Make a change due to I'm using the Ford Explorer heater tube system here, and on the Mustang the coolant temperature sensor is like in this area here, but on the Ford Explorer it's down here. And when I tried to put the Mustang sensor in here, it's larger and it interferes with the distributor. So I've just left the Explorer sensor in here to plug that hole. Probably should have put a regular pipe plug in it, but I'll just leave that in there for now. And so what I've decided to do is relocate the sensor that was here on the heater tubes to the thermostat housing. The factory Mustang housing does have an embossment here you can drill and tap out. Mine was getting kind of corroded up anyway, so I bought a cheap replacement, and it was already drilled and tapped for this. And for the right size, the sensor went right in there. So I've moved it to there. Some people mention moving it over to where the gauge sensor is, so that it's in the intake, and then put the gauge sensor over here. I decided to do it this way. I know I'm not going to get the exact same reading because I'm on the wrong side of the thermostat. So I don't think that's going to cause any problems. Assuming the thermostat's opening and closing correctly, we should be okay. From what I understand, the temperature variation for this sensor isn't huge. So long as it's within reason, it should be fine. Some people put it in the back of the intake manifold, which they don't recommend because the coolant is a bit cooler back there. So they say always keep it at the front of the engine. So I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work out or causes problems, I'll deal with it. But I think it'll be okay. And that sensor, or sorry, the thermostat, I always drill a hole in the very top of them, a small hole to burp and bleed air out. So there'll always be a little bit of flow right there regardless. But again, not the ideal situation. It should be over here, but we're going to go with that and see how it works. Decided to keep the Mustang throttle body. We'll do the Explorer at a later date. There's a couple modifications have to be done to make the Explorer one fit, and decided not to do that this time. But one thing I did do is I swapped out the studs, the throttle body studs that were factory with the Mustang, and replaced them with 3.5-inch long bolts, coarse thread 5/16, just hardware store bolts. The plating was getting all corroded, or was missing off the studs, so it was corroding really bad. So I've gone ahead and put these in here. I think this might be a little easier to get this thing on and off without the studs anyway, because once you undo the bolts, this whole thing will come off rather than trying to have to slide it off the studs. Studs are better. I'm not saying go away from them, but we're going to try this for a little bit and see how it works. All right, we got the new intake on. I think I've got everything buttoned up, so let's see if it fires up. All right, well, I'm happy with that. All right, so we're not quite ready to put the hood back on it yet. A couple other things I've worked on recently is installing a high volume fuel pump and a wide band air fuel ratio gauge and sensor. And the reason I did that is because we are going to install a supercharger on this. And so we'll save that for next episode. We're going to wrap this one up. But stay tuned for that, and we'll see if we can add a few more ponies under the hood here. So otherwise, thank you for watching. We will see you later.